Welcome to the third episode in a series of how-to videos designed to help you share the gospel. In these videos, we're talking through different aspects of evangelism and how we might explain things to a non-Christian. The question for this video is, how do we know that it's the Christian God? We can look out at the world and we can know that a God exists. But what can we know about that God? Well, we can know this God is big, powerful, creative, intelligent. But how do we know it's the Christian God rather than the Muslim God or the Hindu gods? Well, really, we can only know who this God is if that God speaks and gives us divine revelation. That is, this God has spoken through human agents to write down and record for us who He is, how this world works, how the afterlife works, and all those sorts of questions. Now, I would argue the reason we know it's the Christian God is because we have this book called the Bible. And that book, unlike any of its competitors, can prove that it is more than a man-made book. It is a divinely inspired book. How does it do that? Well, I would appeal to prophecy fulfilled. God has given us hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of future predictive prophecies in the Old Testament. Some of those prophecies were related to things that would happen in the history of Israel, that they would be carried off into captivity by the Babylonians, or that they would return after 70 years, or that King Cyrus of the Persians would be the one to return them. But there were also lots and lots of prophecies about a coming Messiah. In fact, depending on how you count them, over 300 prophecies. How do we know if those prophets were really hearing from God or whether they were just making things up? Well, the best piece of evidence is whether those things actually then went on to happen. Now, admittedly, if I make my future predictive prophecy general enough, we can get pretty creative with history as it unfolds to argue how it interprets that prophecy. But the more specific my prophecy, the less we can argue that it's just coincidence or creative fulfillment. Of the prophecies about a coming Messiah, there are so many specific details. That he would be born in Bethlehem, of the line of David. Even the approximate year of his birth was prophesied in advance. That he would be carried away to Egypt with his parents and brought back by God. That he would be called a Galilean. But so many of the prophecies that we have fulfilled are actually at the other end of Jesus' life, towards his death and his resurrection. Details like riding into Jerusalem on a donkey, being betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, the idea that 30 pieces of silver would be used to buy the potter's field, that they would crucify Jesus, prophesied 700 years in advance by the prophet Isaiah, that they would divide up his garments amongst them, that they would gamble for his clothing. Detail after detail after detail after detail after detail. Any one of them in isolation you might be able to argue was a coincidence. But when Jesus walks onto the scene in about 4 BC and in his 30-odd years on this earth fulfills hundreds upon hundreds of his prophecies, it seems just too much to be a coincidence. There's a famous exercise done by Professor Peter Stoner where he took just the 8 biggest prophecies about Jesus and calculated the odds of any of those 8 prophecies all happening in any one human being in all of human history. And he calculated the probability as 1 chance in a 1 followed by 17 zeros. Now, to illustrate that number, he gave an illustration that probably makes more sense to our American listeners. Let me see if I can translate it into an Australian context for you. He said that 1 chance in 10 to the 17th power was like hunting for a 20-cent piece that's been marked with a black marker pen. So if we took our marker pen and we marked it with a big X on the side, and then we buried the state of New South Wales 50 centimeters deep in 20-cent pieces, and then we send our 1 marked 20-cent piece out there into the middle of the state, and then I put you up in a helicopter, and you're going to be blindfolded, but you can tell the pilot north, south, east, west. He will fly you wherever you want to go. But when you instruct him, he will land that helicopter, and still blindfolded, you will climb out, reach down into the mounds and mounds of 20-cent pieces, and pick up exactly that 1 marked 20-cent piece. 10 to the 17th power. It's near enough that mathematically we'd call it basically impossible, and yet that's only 8 of the hundreds of prophecies that were made about Jesus. The fact that those prophets truly did hear from God, it's evidenced by the fact that those things came true. That's evidence that that book, the Bible, is more than a man-made book. It's a divine book. It's exactly what the scripture says of itself, that it's God-breathed. And so we can know who God is because of how he has revealed himself in that book. We can know that God is loving, that he is holy, that he is merciful, that he is just. We can know who we are. We can know that we have a soul, something we can't see or measure. We can know about the afterlife, which none of us have experienced. And we can know all this because God, who created this world, has spoken and told us how it would happen. That's a simple argument for why the Christian God, why the Bible. And it's a really important argument to be able to make in our evangelism, because those things obviously aren't shared by many of the non-Christians we encounter. I hope that's been a help to you. Please like and subscribe to these videos. We're going to be producing more of them in the coming days. And if you've got any other topics that you would like us to cover, please comment in the comments section below this video, and we'll do our best to try and get those questions answered. As we've been saying, please go share your faith.